The 12th tutor left on a Tuesday. She did not say goodbye. She walked out of the classroom at Frost Academy, with her scarf still half unwound, and her coat carried over her arm rather than put on, the way people leave a room when they are not sure they can hold themselves together long enough to finish dressing. Behind her, the classroom looked the way it always did after 30 minutes with Leo Vane. Books on the floor, an ink bottle tipped on its side, blue spreading across the corner of a page like something wounded, a chair pushed at the wrong angle, and at the desk nearest the window, Leo himself, 8 years old, slight, with his father's jaw and his mother's eyes, and the particular stillness of a child who has been very still for a very long time. Headmaster Corvin Frost stood in the doorway, watching the tutor leave, then turned to face Matteo Vane. He was a composed man, frost, gray at the temples, cufflinks polished. The kind of person who had learned early that a calm voice was the most effective kind of threat. "Your son does not need another tutor," Frost said. He had said this before. "He needs discipline." Matteo said nothing. He had been standing in this doorway, or one like it, too many times now to have a fresh response. Leo had not spoken in 11 months. Not since the night 3 men had come through a door. He should not have been able to reach and taken him for 6 hours before Matteo's people found him. 6 hours. Matteo had been 7 minutes late. He had replayed those 7 minutes every night since. He had done everything a mafia boss does when a threat has been identified and must not happen again. He rebuilt the lock system. He reviewed camera feeds every evening. He stood in the hall outside Leo's bedroom on nights when he could not sleep. He enrolled Leo in Frost Academy because Frost had a reputation, because the council trusted him, because every family who had sent a difficult child through those gates had come back with an heir who knew how to survive. Affection creates hesitation. Frost had once told a room full of mafia fathers, "Hesitation kills heirs." Matteo had believed it. He had believed it because he was afraid his own love was not enough to keep Leo safe. And so he had hired someone else's discipline, and he had watched 12 tutors fail. Clara Reed arrived at 9:10 on a Wednesday morning, and the first thing people noticed was that she did not look the part. She was curvy in the way that narrow corridors at Frost Academy had not planned for. A coat that had seen several winters, a bag that held more books than it was comfortable carrying, a voice too soft for a room designed to produce fear. One of Matteo's advisors looked at her once in the entrance hall and said quietly, "She looks like she belongs in a nursery, not an heir room." Clara was 3 feet away. She heard it. She said nothing. She signed the visitor's register and followed the secretary, the only sign she'd heard anything at all in the way she carried herself. Straight-backed, deliberate, like someone who had decided a long time ago not to slow down for it. Frost met her outside the classroom door. He was charming in the professional way of a man who knows what he is worth and wants you to know too. He said Miss Reed had come highly recommended, that he had great respect for her approach, that heirs were, of course, a particular kind of student. Then he said, they require structure above all else. Affection without structure is sentiment, and sentiment in these families is a luxury that gets children killed. Clara looked at him. Kindness without structure is sentiment, she said. That is not what I teach. She looked at the advisor near the door. Do not mistake my quiet voice for permission to ignore me." Then she looked back at Frost. "I am gentle with children, Mr. Frost, not with adults who frighten them." Frost smiled. He did not move. Clara walked past him into the classroom. Leo did not look up when she came in. He was sitting at the desk nearest the window, as always. His position was consistent across every tutor report Clara had been given. Window desk. Slight turn toward the door, pen in hand, expression of someone waiting for something unpleasant. Clara set her bag down at the front of the room. She did not sit at the teacher's desk. She pulled a chair to the side of the room, not close enough to crowd him, not far enough to suggest she was afraid of him. She placed 3 things on the table within his reach: a sheet of blank paper, a small box of pencils, a picture book without words. She said, "You do not have to speak to me, but you are allowed to tell me things." Leo looked at the items. He looked at her. He did not push them off the table. This was, Clara noted, already different from the reports. She waited. After a long moment, Leo picked up a pencil and began to draw. A hallway, long, stone-floored with a light at one end, a door at the far end of it, and on the door, a handle. Round, old-fashioned, the kind that predated the electronic locks that controlled most of Frost Academy's interior. Clara looked at the drawing. She did not ask him to explain it. She only said, quietly, "Is that a real door?" Leo did not nod. He did not shake his head, but his pencil returned to the handle and he traced it again, darker this time. Clara stayed with that. When Matteo came to collect Leo that afternoon, he asked Clara for a progress report in the clipped, efficient way he asked for everything, expecting a brief answer. Already moving toward the next task, Clara said, "He is communicating." Matteo stopped. He has not said a word. Speech is not the only proof a child is trying. Matteo looked at her with the expression he used on people who were wasting his time. "Miss Reed, I have had 12 tutors in this room. Every one of them told me Leo was making progress. In different words, with different theories. He has made no progress. He has made a drawing," Clara said. "Children draw. Children draw what they are thinking about. My son," Matteo said, and his voice dropped into something quieter and more dangerous than anger, "was kidnapped 11 months ago. Every doctor, every specialist, every expert I have consulted has told me his silence is trauma response. I did not hire you to tell me he is drawing pictures. I hired you to get him speaking again." Clara looked at him steadily. Before he becomes an heir, he is still 8 years old. Matteo said nothing. He picked up his coat and left. In the corridor outside, Clara heard Frost's voice, low and smooth, telling Matteo that if the new tutor failed as the others had, the East Protocol would be the appropriate next step. A structured behavioral isolation program, East Wing, designed for difficult heirs. Clara made note of the word East. She did not know yet why it mattered. But Leo had gone very still the moment she'd heard it through the door. His pencil had snapped. She went back through the tutor reports that night. 12 sets of observations. 12 versions of the same failure. Leo pushed books away. Leo tore worksheets. Leo upended ink. Leo wrote irrelevant answers. None of the tutors had documented the irrelevant answers in detail. Clara did. She spread every worksheet across the table in her room at the Academy's guest quarters. In the middle of a multiplication problem, door. In the blank space at the end of a reading comprehension, door. Along the margin of a handwriting exercise, door. Inside a history dictation, between two unrelated words, door. Door was not misspelled. Every letter correct. Every instance spelled perfectly. It was not an error. It was misplaced. A right word in the wrong place. A child who is misbehaving writes nothing, or writes nonsense. A child who is desperate writes what he can, wherever he can, hoping someone will finally look at it the right way. Door appeared near a capital E. Door appeared near the number 7. Door appeared at the margin of every page, positioned the same way, left edge, slightly below center, like a mark at the end of a corridor. Clara looked at the word E. She looked at the number 7. She looked at the drawing of the door with the old round handle. She requested a floor plan of Frost Academy the following morning, telling the secretary she wanted to understand the building layout for emergency exits. The secretary provided a simplified version. Clara studied it. The east wing had a service entrance on its far side. The label on the plan read, East Service Door. It had a round handle, the old-fashioned kind. Corvin Frost had told the parents' board it had been sealed for years. Patience is not weakness, Mr. Vane. Sometimes it is the only door a frightened child can open. Clara said this to Matteo at their second meeting, when he told her that patience was a luxury and that his son needed results. Matteo looked at her as though she had said something in a foreign language. Clara did not repeat herself. She asked instead to see the remaining archive of Leo's older work, anything predating the new tutors, anything from his first weeks at Frost Academy. Corvin Frost said the older materials had been filed away. He said they were not relevant to current progress. He said it in the tone of someone who has decided what is relevant so that no one else needs to. Clara said, patterns do not expire because adults are tired of looking at them. She was given a partial set. It was enough, because Leo was not the only one. In a younger student's spelling exercise, a girl named Esme, 7 years old, who had been at Frost Academy for 2 terms before Leo arrived. The door was not locked. 3 words that made grammatical sense, written inside an answer that was asking for something else entirely. In a drawing submitted by a boy 2 years older than Leo, a ring, a specific kind of ring, with a flat-topped stone setting, the kind Clara had seen on Corvin Frost's right hand, drawn in pencil beside the outline of a door. In a vocabulary worksheet from a student who had since transferred out, the letter E written 6 times along the top margin. In an essay about local history from one of the oldest students, a sentence placed in the middle of an otherwise ordinary paragraph. Loyalty begins when the old door opens. Clara checked the dates. The girl's worksheet predated Leo's enrollment by 4 months. The ring drawing predated Leo's enrollment by 6 months. They had never been in the same class. They could not have coordinated. This was not a game children were playing with each other. This was the language of children in a building that had frightened them into a code. Leo had not invented it. He had arrived already speaking it. And he had been speaking it clearly and consistently for 11 months to 12 tutors who had looked at the word and called it an error. Clara sat for a long time with this. Then she went to the East Wing. The East Corridor was different from the rest of Frost Academy in ways that were hard to name but easy to feel. No children's work on the walls, no sound, no smell of chalk or lunch, or the particular background noise of a building that is actually being used. just the antiseptic quiet of a place that is kept clean in order to remain empty. Clara walked to the end of it. East service door, round handle, old metal. The wood around the frame was clean, the way institutional things are cleaned, regularly, uniformly, without attention to what is underneath. But Clara crouched down. The dust line under the door had been broken, not recently, but it had been broken and had never quite reformed the way undisturbed dust does. She looked at the floor in front of the door, a faint scratch in the coating, long, thin, the kind left by a wheel, a case wheel or a trolley, something with a small radius pulled at an angle. She looked at the camera mount on the wall nearby. There were marks around 2 of the screws, fresh marks. Something had been taken down and put back. Clara did not touch anything. She found 3 people who were easy to overlook. The first was the night custodian, Bram, 11 to 7 shift, 9 years at Frost Academy. He told Clara that on the night Leo Vane was taken, the east corridor power had gone out. Not the whole school, just that section. For 7 minutes, he had heard old metal moving against a frame, the east service door, a round handle being turned. He had told himself the building was settling. He had not written it in the log. He knew which details made the morning easier. The second was Paz in the IT office, who had the exhausted integrity of someone who had known something was wrong and not yet known what to do about it. The primary door log had been cleared, he said, but the backup power log still showed the door. Active signal, 7 minutes, the same night. Power signals did not self-activate. Something had authorized it. The main log was wiped. The backup log was forgotten. Paz had kept a copy. He was glad someone had finally asked. The third witness was Dolores, former administrative secretary, who had resigned after being moved to a role she hadn't applied for. In the week after Leo's abduction, Frost had asked her to reprint the school's access schedule. She had reprinted it. But she had kept the original, because Frost had said when he handed her the request, "No parent needs to see a door that was never opened." She understood it now. She gave Clara the original. Clara assembled everything, the misplaced word in Leo's worksheets, the pattern of E and 7, the other children's hidden sentences, the broken dust line, the scratch on the floor, the camera mount marks, the custodian's memory of a sound, the backup power log, the reprinted schedule, and the original. And she brought it to Matteo. She did not arrange it as an accusation. She arranged it as a reading. "This is what your son has been saying. This is the language he chose, because it was the only one he trusted. This is what it means when you know how to read it." Matteo sat across from her in the room she had been given at the academy. He was very still. In the way that men who are used to being in control become still when control is no longer the relevant category. Clara set the first page down. Leo was not refusing to speak. He was choosing the only language that still felt safe. She set Leo's worksheets on the table. Not all of them, the essential ones. Door beside E, door beside 7. Door at the left margin, positioned like a mark at the end of a long hallway, the drawing of the old round handle. He was not spelling a word wrong, Clara said. He was placing the right word where adults would keep seeing it. He needed someone to find it before they found him again. Matteo looked at the pages. He looked at the drawing of the handle. He had seen that handle. In the police photographs from the investigation into Leo's abduction, at the end of an east corridor, on a door he had been told was sealed, Clara set the second layer down, the other children's pages. The door was not locked. In a 7-year-old's spelling exercise, 4 months before Leo arrived, the ring drawn beside a door. 6 months before Leo arrived, the E repeated along a margin. Loyalty begins when the old door opens, in the middle of an older student's history essay. Frost, who had been standing in the doorway since Matteo arrived, said, "Children copy each other. It is the most common classroom behavior." Clara looked at him, not when the copies begin before they were ever placed in the same class. She turned back to Matteo. These children were never in the same class. The dates prove it. They were all using the same code because they were all living inside the same fear. Matteo said nothing. Clara set the third layer down, the backup power log. East service door, active signal, 7 minutes. Camera coverage, east wing. Offline, 7 minutes. Primary access log, cleared. Matteo stared at the number, 7. The number he had been living inside for 11 months. The 7 minutes he had been late. He had been measuring them against his own failure. He had not known he was supposed to measure them against a door. "That is how long it took," Clara said quietly. The door was open for 7 minutes. The camera was off for 7 minutes, long enough to move a child. She set the final layer down, the photograph of the dust line under the door, the scratch on the floor in front of it, the camera mount with the fresh screw marks, and the image she had asked one of Matteo's people to capture that morning, after she had told him where to look. The inside of Corvin Frost's ring, a flat stone setting with a concealed chip beneath it, an override key, programmable, the kind that could authorize a power signal to a sealed door without leaving a trace in the primary log. If you wiped the primary log, if you forgot about the backup. Matteo sat for a long time looking at this. Clara said nothing. She had learned in 22 years of teaching that the moment of understanding was not one that benefited from narration. Frost had found out she was asking questions by mid-afternoon. He came to Matteo before Clara could reach him again. He was measured and calm and slightly sorrowful, which was the performance he was best at. He said that Clara was doing what well-meaning people, without real experience, always did in these situations. She was building a narrative around a traumatized child's behavior that confirmed what she wanted to believe. She was aggravating Leo's symptoms by giving his fixation on a door a kind of false significance. She was, with the best of intentions, making things worse. He recommended, with deep regret, that Leo be transferred to the East Protocol immediately. A structured program. Separation from stimuli. Behavioral recalibration. East Wing. Matteo looked at Leo, who had been sitting at the far side of the room throughout this conversation in the particular way he had, present but unreachable, watching without appearing to watch. Leo's face had gone the color of old paper. Frost gestured to the guard near the door. Clara stepped between Leo and the guard. Matteo said, "Miss Reed, you are a tutor." Frost said, "This is a family and institutional matter. Step aside." Clara did not look at Frost. She looked at Matteo, then protect him by listening to him. She did not raise her voice. If you let them take him east, you are sending him back to the word he has been trying to survive. Frost said, "Children of power must learn obedience, before affection ruins them. Matteo said nothing, and Leo, without a word, without a sound, picked up the pencil that was sitting on the table beside him and pressed the tip into the wood of the desk and wrote a single word, door, not on paper. On the surface of the desk where no one could take it away, where it would stay. Matteo looked at his son's hand. He looked at the word, and something in the math of him changed. He had spent 11 months measuring 7 minutes. He had spent 11 months calling his son broken. He had stood outside Leo's bedroom door in the dark and not known that his son was trying to reach him from the other side of the same wall, using the only word he trusted in every place he could think to put it. Matteo said to Frost, "Step back." Then he crossed the room and crouched in front of Leo. He was not a man who crouched. He was not a man who made himself small. He did it anyway. He said, very quietly, "Which door?" Leo looked at him. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then Leo raised his hand, very slowly, and pointed east. Matteo looked where his son was pointing. He said, "I hear you now." The evidence went to the council that evening. Matteo did not go to the East Wing himself. He sent 2 people he trusted with the backup power log, the photograph of the ring, the original access schedule, and the custodian's account. He did not execute Corvin Frost in a corridor, partly because Clara had asked him not to. She had said, "Let Leo see that truth can win without becoming another nightmare." And he had looked at his son, who had been watching everything from the corner, and he had understood that this was the last lesson Leo had not yet been given. That power did not have to express itself in blood, that sometimes it expressed itself in evidence. That the most dangerous thing a man like Corvin Frost could face was not a gun. It was a teacher with a backup power log, and 3 witnesses no one had thought to interview. Frost's ring was confiscated. The East Protocol was suspended pending investigation. 3 other families were contacted about children in the program. Frost was held quietly by people who did not leave marks. Before Frost was let out, Matteo held out his hand. The ring. Frost looked at him. For the first time, the calm expression did not hold. He looked at his own hand as if it had betrayed him. Then he removed it. He would answer for it, but not in front of Leo. In the classroom, which had gone quiet now, Leo sat at his desk. He looked at what he had scratched into the wood. Door. Then he picked up a fresh piece of paper. He wrote 2 words. He opened it. He held the paper out toward the space where Corvin Frost had been standing. Not for anyone in particular, for the record, because a child who has been trying to speak for 11 months does not stop the moment someone finally listens. He just stops being alone in the saying of it. Matteo came back the following morning. The classroom was empty except for Clara, who was sorting Leo's worksheets into a final folder. Matteo sat down in the chair across from her desk, not across from the teacher's desk, the one she never used, but across from the small table where she had been working. He had no agenda, no list of requirements. He sat down the way people sit when they are not sure of the right words and have decided to stay anyway. After a moment, he said, "I called your patient's weakness." Clara did not look up from the folder. "You called it a luxury," she said. "Which is a different mistake." He was quiet. "I taught men to fear my voice," he said. "I never learned how to hear my son's silence." Clara set the folder down. She looked at him, not the way she looked at a boss. the way she looked at people when she had decided to say the true thing. "He was reaching for you," she said. "He just needed you to read the hand he had left on the page." Matteo looked at the worksheets in the folder, door after door after door, 11 months of the same word in the same wrong places. 11 months of his son sitting in classrooms full of adults who had never thought to ask what the word was doing there. "I am sorry," he said. He said it plainly, without qualification, without the particular softening that people use when they want the apology to cost them less. He said it to Clara, and he meant it for Leo too. "I should have asked him sooner." "Which door?" Clara nodded. The door to the classroom opened. Leo. He came in quietly, the way he came into most rooms, assessing first, entering second. He carried a piece of paper. He placed it on the table between Matteo and Clara. On the paper, 3 figures drawn in pencil, one tall, one shorter, one small, all of them facing a door that was open. Underneath the drawing, in Leo's careful handwriting, one word, home. Matteo looked at the drawing for a long time. He did not reach for Leo first. He waited, and Leo, at his own speed, at the pace of a child who had been choosing every movement for 11 months, crossed the small distance between the table and his father's chair. He did not say anything. He leaned against Matteo's arm. Matteo put his hand on his son's back, and across the table, Clara Reed picked up her folder and began to work again, because some things did not need a witness. They only needed someone who had been patient enough to wait for them. Frost Academy was investigated. The East Protocol was dismantled. 5 families were notified. The door log from the night of Leo's abduction was reconstructed and submitted as evidence. Corvin Frost's final statement to the council included the line, "Children of power must learn obedience before affection ruins them." The council made note. Affection, as it turned out, had done nothing to ruin Leo Vane. It had saved a backup log. It had asked a custodian about a sound. It had sat across from a silent child with a box of pencils and a book without words and waited. There is a version of this story where the mafia boss finds the door himself, where he breaks it down with the force that is, after all, what he is known for, where the villain is punished in the old way and the child is returned by power. But that is not what happened. What happened was that a curvy teacher with a worn bag and a quiet voice sat in a cold classroom and looked at a word that everyone else had called a mistake. Door was not misspelled. It was misplaced, and the misplacement was the message. And the message had been there for 11 months, waiting in the only language a frightened 8-year-old knew how to use. By dawn, Matteo Vane learned that silence is not always surrender. Sometimes it is a child knocking from the other side of fear. And sometimes the only person who can hear it is the teacher everyone mistook for too gentle to survive.